Stephen Timms.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on her appointment as Chief Secretary. I'm very pleased to see a former Pensions Minister in her role, and I want to make some points about the pensions measures announced in the autumn statement in the course of my remarks. But first of all, about benefit uprating. I wrote on behalf of the Select Committee to the Chancellor a month ago asking for two specific things. First, that working age benefits should be uprated in line with the normal formula by September's rate of inflation, and secondly, that local housing allowance should be rebased to the 30th percentile. And I'm very relieved that both of those points were in the Chancellor's statement. But, you know, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation reported last month that there were 3.8 million people experiencing destitution in the UK last year. And a fortnight ago, the Trussell Trust reported food bank demand is 16% higher this year than it was last year. 1.5 million emergency food bank parcels given out in the 6 months from April to September. How is it that our economy is failing to meet the basic needs of so many in our society? We need the economy to start functioning properly again in a way that it clearly is not at the moment and hasn't been for a number of years. Spurious justifications were proposed for uprating working age benefits by a lower amount in the autumn statement. They, if they'd been adopted, would simply have made things even worse. So I very much welcome the fact the Treasury has resisted those calls and congratulate the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions on achieving the outcome that we've heard this afternoon. And I also very much welcome the rebasing of local housing allowance. By next April, it will have been frozen for 4 years in a period in which rents have risen very sharply. And the freeze was causing widespread homelessness amongst working families who were doing perfectly decent jobs but could no longer afford the rent. That was then imposing enormous costs on local councils for temporary accommodation. So I'm very pleased it's been rebased, but what I want to call for, Madam Deputy Speaker, is for annual rebasing of the local housing allowance. It should be at the 30th percentile each year, and I hope that we will be told that it will. I'm also glad that the temptation to water down the pension triple lock has been resisted. The Working Pensions Select Committee report published last week a report on the government's cost of living support payments. We identified a number of gaps in those payments that were made. I was relieved to hear from the Chancellor in his answer to my question that the Household Support Fund is being maintained, and I think there's a very strong case for making that a permanent feature of our system so that local authorities know that they will have funds each year for providing local welfare support. That's been very important in the crisis over the last few years, and I hope we can make it longer term, and I hope the rules for it don't keep changing as they have done over the last few years, making it difficult for local authorities to make a good job of administering it. But I'm glad it's there next year, and I hope the rules are not going to change for it next year as well. The consultation that we've seen over the proposed changes to the work capability assessment that was mentioned by the Chancellor has been rushed and inadequate. Only 8 weeks for some very major changes being considered. And those changes, which the Chancellor said will now go ahead, are going to make things very difficult for a significant number of people. We're told in a document that's been published, I think since the Chancellor sat down, that the vast majority of those who've already been assessed as having limited capability for work-related activity won't have to go through another work capability assessment again, because we've been told that the work capability assessment is to be abolished. That will be, of course, some relief for many, but it remains very unclear what is going to replace the work capability assessment in the long term, and when is the legislation that we've been promised going to come forward. I'm glad the Chancellor is progressing the aims he set out at the Mansion House to increase pension fund investment in the economy, to increase returns to pensioners, as he said, to improve outcomes for investors and to unlock capital for our growth businesses. I think there is a good deal of benefit in that approach. But where is the pensions bill? I'm genuinely mystified by this. In July, when the Chief Secretary was the Pensions Minister, her department promised a permanent regulated regime for pension super funds as soon as as parliamentary time allows. Evidence to our committee has been very clear that in the absence of a permanent statutory framework, super funds will continue to struggle, so undermining the Chancellor's aims. I think he's reiterated today his commitment to a regulated regime for pension super funds, but there's no sign of the legislation. I wonder if anyone can tell us what is proposed. The Select Committee called on the pensions regulator to make changes to the new scheme funding regime, a matter that Chief Secretary will be very familiar with from her previous role, to enable open defined benefit schemes like the rail pension scheme to continue to invest in the economy, as the Chancellor rightly wants to happen. The department has told us that those concerns are going to be addressed, the concerns about the well-being of open defined benefit schemes, but they haven't been yet. The new code, which is causing a lot of anxiety, is due to be, as the Minister knows, to be introduced in April. So any clarification of the intention there will be very gratefully received. I look forward to hearing more about the role in consolidation amongst smaller defined benefit pension schemes that the Chancellor mentioned in his statement. And the role that he envisages for the outstandingly successful Pension Protection Fund in taking on that task. The Chancellor has talked about a consultation on a pot for life approach to pension saving. There are certainly benefits to that approach, and he referred to them, but there are problems as well. So he said there's going to be a consultation. I think that is appropriate. In particular, there is the challenge for employers of having to manage lots of different pension funds amongst their different employees. There will be a significant increase in employer costs in handling that, and I hope that will be properly explored in the consultation that is to come. I welcome changes that have been announced in the written statement on Monday to improve the health and support for employment for people out of work on health grounds, people with disabilities, including better employment support, the plans for a severe disability group announced in that written statement, and as the Select Committee recommended, trying out matching ill health benefit claimants with an assessor with experience of their primary health condition. The ideas for assessing fluctuating health conditions I hope will be helpful as well. And I wholeheartedly welcome the expansion that the Chancellor mentioned of integrated placement and support, as again recommended in the committee's report on the government's plan for jobs. The evidence is clear that is helpful for people with mild to moderate mental health conditions in getting back into work, and the increased access to talking therapies is welcome as well. The Chancellor has announced an expansion of the Restart scheme. We don't really know how good that is, because up till now the Department has always refused to publish the outcome data from Restart. They have now said, and I'm glad they have, in response to the Select Committee, they will start publishing that data, so we'll see whether that scheme is doing a good job or not. The committee has taken evidence this morning on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is to target inactivity. And one of the problems with that scheme is that the allocations for it were made in the middle of the year in which the money was supposed to be spent. So not surprisingly, people haven't been able to set up the programmes which the funding is there to support. I do very much hope the government will get its act together on this and make sure that the allocations are announced in good time for local authorities to award contracts to providers to deliver the help that is needed. The improvements for employment support that have been promised have been matched, however, by announcements about harsher sanctions. Now, it's very clear, I think, that sanctions are already at a high level for people claiming universal credit and the other working age benefits. There is no evidence at all that what is proposed will make it more likely that people will move into work. And particularly where people are out of work because of a mental health problem, there is growing evidence that increasing sanctions makes matters worse. And there's been a lot of response to the government's announcements on this, that particularly for people out of work on mental health grounds, increasing sanctions in the way that is proposed is going to make people less likely to get into work rather than more likely. And yesterday I received a letter with 70 signatures from single parent groups, children's charities, domestic abuse charities and others, asking that the Select Committee should have a look at the newly increased work obligations being imposed on the carers for young children. At the moment, it's carers of young children expect to work for 16 hours a week. That is to be doubled almost to 30 hours per week. And the letter challenges those proposals for reasonableness and indeed feasibility. If you're looking after young children, is it really appropriate to be demanding such large working weeks for those who are far, far greater than has been the requirement up till now? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what all of us must hope after the misery of the past few years is that the plan set out by my right honourable friend in answering the Chancellor's statement is put in place next year, finally to reignite the much needed growth in the UK economy.